Okay, real quick, I gotta show you something. So this is Austin, Texas, and this is YouTube. A couple months ago, we came up with a pretty cool idea. What if we could premiere a bunch of work from your favorite creators here in Austin, while it's also premiering on YouTube to a global audience? And here's the thing. If each new work premiered back to back and each creator promoted the other, we could create a pretty cool ecosystem. Maybe both audiences will find something new and valuable. So that's how we came up with the name, Local by Global. The more you know.
This is the Forth and Clyde Canal in central Scotland. Completed in 1790, it was the first canal to cross any part of the British Isles. There are a lot of geographical terms for coastal features where the sea indents into the land: sounds, inlets, fjords, lochs, coves, bays, and so on. They all have subtly different meanings. It can vary by location, but in Scotland, a lot of them are called firths, and they're pretty important when it comes to navigation. The Forth and Clyde Canal, as its name strongly suggests, connects the Firth of Forth to the Firth of Clyde. It also has a branch into the heart of Glasgow. When it was built, this canal dramatically shortened the transit times for goods in the region, and it also served as the testing waters for the very first steam-powered boats. Not long after the Forth and Clyde opened, another important canal was completed in Scotland. The Union Canal connected the cities of Falkirk and Edinburgh, opening up a route for coal and other minerals from the mines and quarries around Lanarkshire to the capital. Along the way, it passes over some pretty impressive aqueducts, including the Avon Aqueduct near Linlithgow. A connection to the Forth and Clyde Canal in Falkirk would provide a direct waterway link between the two largest cities in the country, Edinburgh and Glasgow, without ships needing to navigate the hazardous Firth of Forth. But there is the challenge of elevation. Union Canal sits about 115 feet or 38 meters above the level of the Forth and Clyde. Moving people and goods by boat has a lot of advantages. It's cheap, it's efficient, it usually takes less infrastructure, and it allows for connectivity across the globe, but there is a major disadvantage. The waterways that ships and boats traverse have to be pretty much level. Boats don't climb hills like cars, trucks, and trains. This is the main purpose of a lock: raising or lowering a vessel to navigate elevation changes in waterways. In fact, locks are pretty much the only solution to this engineering challenge, except in a few rare cases. You've seen the title, you know where I'm headed with this, but the story of the Falkirk Wheel, the only rotary boat lift in the world, is fascinating. Not just because of the mechanisms, but also how it came to be in the first place. It's not easy to accomplish projects like this. The Falkirk Wheel is not the passion project of some lone eccentric billionaire. This is public infrastructure, which means a vast array of stakeholders had to come together and agree that this bizarre structure was worth the resources that went into building it. It's got some very clever engineering under the hood and a lot of lessons in its creation that I think apply to other challenges we face today. I'm Grady, and this is Practical Engineering. Of course, the original connection between the Forth and Clyde and Union Canals did use locks, a lot of locks. This map from 1898 shows the flight of 11 locks required to get boats up and down between the two. You can imagine the time, resources, and effort involved in navigating this staircase. The process took the better part of a day, and not only that, it used a lot of water from the Union Canal. Even though boats can move through locks in both directions, water only moves through in one. Each structure always fills from the upper canal and always drains to the lower one. That's just gravity. But it's important to realize that even though most locks don't use pumps, the energy required to raise and lower boats through isn't free. Each passage through costs roughly one lockful of water from the upper canal. In addition to the inconvenience and water usage, other factors eventually drove these canal systems in Scotland into disrepair and abandonment. The canals were small, and as ships got larger, the narrow and shallow passages became less useful for transporting materials and goods. The railroads also started competing with the canals, offering faster connections between major cities. By 1930, the canals were barely used, and by 1960, they were choked with vegetation and debris. Motorway construction disconnected several segments, and authorities decided to close them for good. That could have been the end of the story, and honestly, it wouldn't be too surprising. It's been the fate of many of the world's great canals and inland waterways as transportation technologies and overland shipping have passed them by. But then the year 2000 happened. Maybe you remember this, it was a weird time to be alive. There was this strange tension between excitement about the new century and fear that all our computer systems would crash into an apocalypse. The programmers and IT professionals took good care of us on the computer side, but there were people working hard on the celebrations too. One of those organizations was the United Kingdom's Millennium Commission. The idea was simple. Take some of the money from the National Lottery and direct it toward interesting and impactful projects that would help mark the turn of the century. In Scotland, a large consortium of organizations, public, private, and volunteers, got together and applied for a grant from the Millennium Commission. In 1997, funding was awarded to cover approximately half the cost of the Millennium Link, a massive undertaking to revitalize and reopen the canals that once connected Scotland from coast to coast, restore locks, build hike and bike trails, and rehabilitate bridges. The work included the Kelpies, a sculpture of two huge horse heads that serve as the gateway to the Forth and Clyde Canal. That was a pretty fascinating civil engineering project in its own right. But of course, the Millennium Link's flagship project was reconnecting the Forth and Clyde to the Union Canal. But rather than do it with locks, the group wanted a 21st century landmark, or I guess more of a watermark. A fast, efficient connection that would serve as a capstone to the canal revitalization, draw tourists from around the world, and serve as a symbol of the region that was once a hub of transportation and commerce in Scotland. And in fact, the hub is a good metaphor for what they came up with. The Falkirk Wheel opened for traffic in May 2002, and now, more than 2 decades later, it's pretty clear they nailed the idea. Here's how it works. Boats bound for the Union Canal enter a circular turning basin at the bottom. The wheel has 2 opposed arms, each with water-filled gondolas or caissons spanning between them. Those gondolas are mounted on bearings that ride on circular rails. When one goes up, the other comes down, so traffic can move in both ways. The wheel is driven at its center using hydraulic motors that keep the motion smooth and slow. Idler pinions mesh between 2 identical ring gears, one fixed and centered on the shaft, the other surrounding each gondola. This arrangement enables the gondolas to counter-rotate as the wheel moves, maintaining their perfect upright position throughout the full range of motion. The elegance of the Falkirk wheel hides some fairly complicated systems that make it function. At the top and bottom, each gondola has to be able to open and close to let boats in and out. And the aqueduct at the top needs the same capability so water doesn't just flow off the edge when the wheel is moving. The docking and undocking procedure is a delicate dance. When a gondola reaches the top position, stow pins extend to lock it in place. Then, an extendable lance connects it to a hydraulic power unit. A U-shaped seal extends to bridge the gap between the 2 structures, and pipes fill the gap between the gates with water, balancing the pressure. Finally, hydraulic rams open the gates on both sides, allowing boats to enter or leave. The whole process happens in reverse, and then the wheel is free to move again. Part of the engineering genius of the Falkirk wheel is that it's always balanced, whether there are boats inside the gondolas or not. This is one of those confusing things about buoyancy. A floating vessel always displaces its own weight in water. Theoretically, as long as the water level stays the same, when a boat floats over an aqueduct, there is no change in forces on the columns. The displaced water flows away, balancing the new force of the boat. Same thing for the gondolas. When a boat floats in, its weight and water flows out, maintaining a balance between the two sides. As a result, the Falkirk wheel doesn't really require a lot of power to operate. It's about 1.5 kilowatt hours for a half turn of the wheel, often compared to the power required to boil 8 kettles of water. Where I live, that's less than 25 cents in electricity. And unlike the day-long climb of the Industrial Revolution-era locks, the wheel moves boats between levels in about 5 minutes. The Scottish canals see almost no commercial shipping these days. They're still too small, and the road and rail networks are still faster, but the canals do see a lot of traffic. There's a whole class of vessels specifically designed for navigating the unique and historic canals of the UK. Similar to RV culture in the US, narrowboats ply the inland waters across England, Wales, Scotland, and beyond, used for holidays, touring, and even as long-term homes. During the early Industrial Revolution, boats like this were pulled along canals by horses or donkeys from towpaths that ran alongside them. Modern narrowboats are self-propelled and often equipped with domestic comforts, including bathrooms, kitchens, heating, and internet. The number of boats has been steadily increasing over the past decade, offering the freedom and lower cost of a nomadic lifestyle on the canals. Even for those not living on narrowboats, cruises and tours along the canals offer something unique. It's a totally different way to experience the landscape in some of Great Britain's most beautiful areas, and it offers insights into the history of the region that you can't get anywhere else. And of course, you also get to see the fascinating infrastructure, including a boat lift that you won't find anywhere else in the world. But it doesn't go all the way up. When a segment of the canal was relocated as part of the Millennium Link, it needed to cross the Antonine Wall, a Roman-era defensive perimeter and UNESCO World Heritage Site. Rather than disturb it, the new canal was built into a tunnel below. From the aqueduct at the top of the wheel, 2 new locks raise boats the remaining distance once they pass underneath the wall to the top of the Union Canal. The Antonine Wall marked the far northern border of the Roman Empire. On another edge, just a handful of decades before it was built, Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying the city of Pompeii in ash. But there's a twist to that story. My friends at the podcast Radiolab are just about to premiere a fantastic video about the survivors of Pompeii and how we discovered that some people actually escaped. This simultaneous release is part of a collaboration with the Independent Media Initiative to highlight some of the best educational and artistic creators on the internet. If you're watching this live at IMI Fest, hey! I'm really thankful for the award the channel won this year for my practical construction special, and I'm so excited to hand off to one of my favorite shows on the internet, Radiolab, for the next video in this collaboration. Go check it out after this. When I was a kid, my dad used to tell me if the only reason you want something is because it's cool, you probably don't need it. You can look at me and probably tell that I took that advice to heart, but there are situations where it's worth doing something just because it's gonna be impressive. The Falkirk wheel is a perfect example. Locks are a perfectly functional solution to get boats up and down to different elevations. There are thousands of them around the world diligently serving our inland waterways. Scotland wanted something special, something that would spark a resurgence in their canal system and revitalize the sense of pride in communities along them. It took guts to try something completely different, and it paid off. Millions of people have visited to watch it turn or travel through it. The Falkirk wheel didn't just reconnect 2 canals, it reconnected people with the idea that infrastructure can be both useful and pretty cool.
The explosion of Mount Vesuvius at Pompeii is one of the most dramatic things that have happened in all of human history.
And we all think we know the story. Volcanic eruption, thousands of people vaporized in an instant. no one survives.
But recently, we talked to this historian, Stephen Tuck, who said maybe that's all wrong. Maybe people survived.
Hey, I'm Sarah.
Hey, I'm Latif.
And we recently did a podcast episode about this, one of our most popular episodes of last year.
People loved how it transported them. They said they felt like they were escaping the volcano themselves.
Now, we at Radiolab love to do experiments.
And we wondered, could we recreate that experience for YouTube with visuals, but crucially without getting in the way of your imagination?
So we decided to partner with artist Linda Bostrom to try it out.
We're going to play you that clip.
You'll hear Miami University historian Stephen Tuck explain the chaos of Pompeii to the two of us.
We're so honored that this experiment is taking place as part of IMI Fest,
Simultaneously premiering locally in Austin and globally on YouTube.
after the incredible work of Grady and the rest of the team at Practical Engineering. Check them out.
And thank you again, IMI Fest.
All right,
here we go.
Oh, wait, you're listening?
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
You're
Listening
to Radiolab.
Radio Lab.
From
WNYC.
See?
Yeah.
Pompeii is a city right along the coast of the Bay of Naples. It's a beautiful location. I sound like a real estate agent, but you know it's a gorgeous location down there in southern Italy along the coast.
If you don't mind volcanoes, it's great.
It keeps the property values down.
Okay, so this is 79 AD.
On August 24th in the morning, there were earthquakes, but these were a common occurrence.
So no one really paid attention to them. Probably just felt like a normal day.
Right.
If I were to walk down the street in Pompeii, the main drag, what would I have seen?
You would have seen a long street with 2 lanes. Many of the shops, the wine bars, people take over the sidewalk and part of the street as they're all crowded out there. And it's a very densely populated, very lively place.
In the backdrop of all this, less than 10 miles northwest of the city, sat a large green cone-shaped mountain. And on this day, at about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, if you were taking maybe a midday break, having some fish, some wine with friends at a sidewalk cafe, and happened to glance up at this mountain, you'd have seen the top of it just explode.
It's just pulverized and blown straight into the air,
This massive dark column of rock and gas
rising up about 20 miles into the atmosphere.
towering over Pompeii, higher than modern airplanes fly.
Oh my God.
So high, in fact.
It takes several hours for that material to rain down fully.
So most of it at this point is just hanging out up there in the air.
Huh.
Which means
If people looked at that and then said, I think it's time to leave, they would have 3-4 hours to get out.
just imagine, maybe you were out running around town doing something.
Your family's at home,
You'd have to get home first, but the sky is rapidly darkening. The earth is shaking.
you're trying to get through the chaos with the earthquake,
Push your way through the people, the animals, the carts.
trying to make it home and gather your family before you go.
When you finally reach your house, maybe someone's missing. Maybe you have a sick relative who can't move so easily. You have no idea how much time you have. Who knows? There's a million ways this could play out.
Yeah.
But when archaeologists dug up some of the houses in Pompeii, they discovered a clue.
Every house would have at least a small shrine to the household gods.
A little hollowed out alcove in the wall where they keep these little statues.
They're mostly bronze figurines.
And the members of the household would pray at the shrine. And when archaeologists uncovered these homes, they noticed
All the household shrines are empty.
all these little statues are gone.
Wait, what does that mean?
Well, it means that people were trying to just grab whatever was grabbable and get out of there. So in those 3 hours, you can imagine that people were out of their houses, maybe on foot or on horseback, dragging carts behind them, just trying to make their way through the crowded, chaotic streets. And the volcano, remember, is to the north, so you kind of can assume most people are trying to go south, towards the southern city gates.
Get a move on, people. No time to waste here.
But
That material
that tall column of debris that's been hanging in the air,
starts to collapse. And because of the prevailing winds coming from the northwest, it collapses towards the south. pushed over like a Jenga tower.
Directly on top of the city of Pompeii.
The ash is filling the air. It's hard to breathe. You can't see anything. And then this pumice stone starts coming down. And then heavier volcanic glassy stones. And they're like missiles.
So all this stuff kind of rains down. The streets fill up, become impossible to move through. And a lot of those people who did try to flee,
If you map the human remains that have been discovered, the vast majority of them are clustered around the gates.
they got caught in a traffic jam. And years later, recovered from their bodies were the little bronze statues of household gods.
Huh.
Okay, but Pompeii, it's a coastal city, right? Like maybe a bunch of people left by sea. Because, if it was me, I would try to get on a boat.
Why would you try to get on a boat?
I would assume that I could get farther away more quickly on a ship.
Yeah.
And if I don't know what's going on, the very least I know is that the problem is on land.
Well, maybe.
Oh, God.
So imagine there's a volcano. Imagine there's also earthquakes.
So there are tsunamis happening here.
Oh.
And those, they're disastrous.
So this is not a calm sea.
And unless somebody left early or timed it perfectly so that they could flow out of the Bay of Naples with those waves going out, once those waves come back in, there's no sailing against them. They would be trapped.
Okay. Maybe not by sea then.
Maybe not. Anyway, things just get worse from there. By dusk, the ash and rock have built up so much that it was impossible to leave.
Some people took refuge in their houses, but the volcanic material came down and the roofs collapsed.
Those who managed to escape the collapsed roofs make their way through the darkness and the heat and the falling missiles and
Took refuge in public buildings and in low areas like cellars.
it was around this time that the second phase of the eruption began with these pulses of super hot volcanic gas.
Estimates between 300 and 600 degrees.
That's Celsius, which is 500 to 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. So hot that in one case in Herculaneum,
They found evidence of gray matter that had been turned to glass.
What?
it got so hot that someone's brain turned to glass.
What?
Yeah. And these gases rolled down the mountain into the city.
And they're heavier than air. And they displace the oxygen starting at the ground and moving up. So the people who are taking refuge in cellars or downstairs in houses are all asphyxiated. There's no way around that. You can't escape that.
Wow. I know Stephen Tuck set out to, find people who survived, but all I'm hearing is the 6 million ways that they could have died. Now, contrary to what you just heard, the episode does go on to talk about the people who seemingly miraculously did survive Pompeii, as well as historian Stephen Tuck's odyssey to try to find them.
Check it out. The episode is called A Little Pompeian Fish Sauce Goes a Long Way.
The title will make sense when you listen.
Episode is linked in the description. Now back to Austin for the IMI Fest and the live stream of the festival from their YouTube channel. Thank you.
Okay, give us 1 second to get the stage set, and we will have a conversation with our creators. This is a bring your own chair situation.
Are we centered?
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Everyone, give it up for those 2 videos.
Thanks.
All right, I will admit moderating things scares me, but we're going to do it together. So one of the things that I know, both of you are incredible science storytellers or engineering storytellers. And one of the things that I noticed as like a through line in both of those videos is that instead of focusing on the like really hardcore equations or science or fact, the thing that grabs you is that you told stories about people and communities. And one of the things that we're trying to highlight, or that like this local global premiere is trying to do, is what does it feel like to show your work in your communities and with people? And so I want to ask both of you, how did it feel watching your videos among your peers?
Yeah, thank you for that question. It is kind of a surreal experience, also because Radiolab, as you can see, we're in a very experimental phase, trying to figure out what our show looks like as a visual product. And there is something kind of crazy about the fact that so much of our work typically happens in a windowless studio, alone, on a mic, and to be in a space where you are sharing that with people in a physical space together, I think is a really special part of what IMI seems to be all about. And yeah, really grateful to IMI Fest and Stuart and Elaine for bringing us all from our separate silos together into a space together.
That was a great answer. That's way better than my answer, which is that it was terrifying. I mean, honestly, there's probably one person maybe in this room who would have clicked that video on YouTube, and so it feels so strange to like force you to watch it. But it is
a pleasure.
Yeah, it's an invigorating experience, and I think it's a cool thing to be in person and watch in person, and I'm appreciative for the opportunity for sure.
I'm gonna dig in that a little bit more, but what is the value of doing things in person, do you think?
I mean, hearing the reactions, I think, is nice, is one thing. And you do get feedback in a different way, which is, the feedback we get on YouTube is through comments, which are, written often in haste, often without, much thought or consideration, whereas when you're in person, you can get much more nuanced ideas about what worked and what didn't and things like that.
I think it also relates back to what the previous discussion was talking about with attention versus education. And I think there's something about being in a physical space where a lot of what you're consuming today has been curated by people whose taste that you trust or whose vision you believe in. And I think, I might be on YouTube and I don't think of myself as an engineering person. And so I might see the thumbnail for the video and be like, okay, that's not for me. I'm not an engineering person. But I loved how, because I'm here, I got to see that video and just like feel a sense of wonder and like nerd out about a thing that I would, never otherwise engage with. So I think there's really something to be said for that.
That's almost like I paid you to do the transition into the next question. One of the themes of IMI Fest this year, you may have noticed, is to watch things that matter. And everyone here is creating things that matter in a very, very different way. And we're, I think, very intentional about like what work that we put out into the world. And so what you guys both just did is like point your audiences towards the other person and say like, this is content that I think matters. And do you think that as an effect can carry weight? Do you think that we should be pointing to our peers that we think are creating good things, even if they're outside of like the scope of our expertise?
Totally. Yeah, I think there's always been a huge value in word of mouth, sharing. You trust your friends, you trust your family about everything from where to live to, what video to watch on YouTube. And I think even if the content, like you said, is not like a perfect match or in the same theme or the same style or anything like that, there's a lot of value in curating and amplifying work that you think is valuable to others.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that there is also something to be said for curation as a valuable thing that online creators can do. Increasingly, I feel like I'm even watching people make reels about what Atlantic articles I should read and, you know, what their thoughts are on it. So I don't know, that is like a valuable resource for me if I see somebody whose thoughts I really think are, you know, really smart and they're telling me to engage with a thing. I think that's great. And also, again, relating back to what Sabrina and, oh my gosh, Destin were talking about, sorry. I think that if there are a sort of cohort of us online that are making content that is both educational and being thoughtful about grabbing people's attention, then I think it is really important for us to like build almost like a coalition of creators that are being thoughtful about that attention, wielding it responsibly, engaging with it responsibly, encouraging people to learn something new, and yeah, just building an alliance of that against, you know, all the other sort of competing, you know, forces that are trying to grab that attention for more nefarious purposes.
Oh my gosh, is that IMI? Is that coalition IMI? But speaking of content, you said that you describe as good or quality. Are there pillars that you think make content worth watching?
Totally. I mean, you want to take that? Okay, I'll go. Yeah, I think definitely there are things that when we are looking at stories we want to do, you know, what makes a Radiolab story and what doesn't. There's some really specific ingredients to that. And of course, a part of that is always like, oh, let's do journalism, let's educate people. But I also think how you do that is really important. And kind of what we played just now is a little bit of an example of our approach, which is like, you always want to make people feel immersed in a time and a place. And the most powerful way to do that is through a story of a character. So often we have either, you know, a person that went through a thing, like, for example, somebody living in Pompeii and their story, which the episode does go on to talk about. But also scientists themselves are so often those characters. And so we're constantly looking for, you know, in the clip you heard, it was Stephen Tuck and his kind of, he raises a question where he's like, maybe people did survive? Am I crazy for thinking that? And then he like goes on this whole journey. And that is part of what makes a story engaging in the Radiolab universe. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I pay the most attention to, and maybe kind of what guides my compass as to what I consider, you know, good and worthwhile, is just what the motive is behind it. And so, you know, if it's education, if it's for the love of art or film or anything like that, I feel that, you know, helps me decide whether something's good or not, whether you know, there's plenty of other motives to influence people to do things or to sell things or stuff like that, that kind of drive content in a different direction. And so that's kind of the compass that I use. And it's also the compass we use to make videos is, you know, we want our motive to be that we love engineering and infrastructure, and we love how it serves people. And so we want that always to shine through as, like, first and foremost, a celebration of, you know, these works that we've created, basically.
Can I ask a question of Brady? Okay.
Please.
One thing that like we run into a lot at Radiolab is like, let's say we're talking about something scientific. Sometimes there's a question of, okay, how deep do I want to go on this? And, you know, we're constantly sitting at the intersection of what is interesting versus what is important. And I think when you ask that question of how deep do I want to go on this science, you're kind of negotiating that. Like, maybe it's important to communicate some aspect of the science, but it's not interesting, or it's really hard to make it interesting, and we're kind of always trying to do that. So I am curious, like, how you approach that question of like, okay, this is like a level of nerding out that's too far, or will you always go down the rabbit hole? Yeah, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's probably the hardest thing that we do is drawing that line of like, okay, how much is this education versus how much is this just like helping you be inspired by something so you might pursue it further if you do, you know, catch an interest on it. And a lot of it is just a gut feel. It's like, okay, we can go deep, and there's interest and intrigue if you dive a little deeper, but you can go too far. And so it's like this weird balancing act between, you know, my team and how we feel about the topic, what resources we have to actually, to tell that story in terms of time and money and footage and all that. And so those kind of all get used to shape how deep we go into the science and engineering of things.
Cool, thank you, that's helpful.
That was a great question. Would you like my mic? Would you like to be the moderator? So we talked a little bit right before we got on. We were like, we kind of want to continue Destin and Sabrina's debate up here. And I think that we're kind of well positioned because from the outside, it looks a little bit like at Radiolab, you're hiding the vegetables a little bit. Like you're building these stories, like that very dramatic stories that draw people in, and then you teach a lot along the way. Whereas every time I click your video, I'm like, scoot up on the edge of my couch and I'm like, I'm about to learn something.
It's just pure vegetables.
I know I'm gonna learn something. So can each of you have 3 minutes to weigh in? It's not timed. But.
Ooh, honestly, I think that there's a reason that Destin and Sabrina were kind of agreeing with each other. I think that both of them are grabbing attention and educating are obviously so important. And I do think that part of the project should be engaging meaningfully about what our people in our position should do with that attention. Like, I think it is important for us to create content about that, to educate people about what attention is, to tell stories about attention so that people can have the tools to like more meaningfully make decisions in the world that we live in now. But yeah, I don't know. I think that there is something that is so human and fundamental to storytelling, and it's like how we have existed as a species for so long that we tell each other stories and we engage with each other's stories, that I really think it's impossible to talk about things that are important without doing that. Like, I kind of as Sabrina said, like, I think that respecting people's time, recognizing that we are all busy and have other things that we could possibly be doing, and the fact that you are, choosing of all the things to press play on an episode of Radiolab, I as a creator need to respect that and engage you and make an effort to make something interesting to you. So I consider that like a deep act of respect.
Yeah, when I was in college for civil engineering, a very weird thing happened to me, which is that like every class I would go to, all of a sudden my perspective would switch. Like I would go to a structural engineering class and all of a sudden I walk into a building and I'm like looking at the girders and how they connected together. I go to a stormwater class and all of a sudden I'm looking at storm drains and how they connect together and how the rain runs. And so every class was like this little lamp turning on that ignited this whole new world to me, that illuminated parts of my world that I had never even paid attention to. And so for our videos, that's what I'm trying to create. So I don't consider it as like hiding the vegetables so much as like, this is a terrible analogy, but like trying to turn on the taste buds that love vegetables, I guess. And so that's how we kind of approach that idea of entertainment versus like we do it out of respect for the viewers, but we're approaching it, I guess, in a little bit different way, which is like trying to inspire that curiosity and turn on parts of the built environment that you may have never noticed before.
I love that too, because I think there's like a real joy that comes with discovering that you love vegetables, right? Like when you come to something on your own as a consumer and you're like, oh, I like went out and learned about this thing because I wanted to and I was interested in it. There's like a hard-won knowledge that is so rewarding, and I feel like there's a deep, I don't know, that there is something to that I think is worth accounting for.
Yeah, and I like in some ways I kind of put myself out there as the person who does get excited about kind of seemingly mundane things, so that you can feel like you know, it opens the door for others to feel that way too. Like I know there's a video out there where I just say, I love pumps. And it's like, who says something like that? But if you see someone who's, you know, so open to being exciting about something like that, you start to be able to feel that way too.
Someone has to be the first one dancing at a party, right? And then everyone will follow. Yeah, you know, it's funny you said that. I had the exact same feeling in like my first design for manufacturing class in like my mechanical engineering program. Of suddenly every object I picked up, and I was like, I know exactly how this was manufactured, and that is so exciting. And it almost, as we were sitting here, I was like, do I say this or do I not say this? But I almost feel like in the storytelling you do, a lot of times the viewer is is the main character as you're like getting your eyes opened to seeing the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's a really common technique that we use, is to put the audience in the position of making a difficult engineering decision, and just because when you think about like, oh, I'm the one who has to like decide what's worth doing versus what's not, it kind of makes it real, and it also celebrates the people who actually do those jobs and make those decisions, and how it's not always as simple as it seems.
So, okay. So how do you guys decide what the next topic you're going to tackle is? Because there's such a huge range of things that fall into both of your purview. What makes it a Radiolab topic, or what makes it a practical engineering topic?
Yeah, I think Radiolab's constantly in a conversation about what our show even is, and I think traditionally, because we started out 20 plus years ago as a science show, science and philosophy show, there is that really strong identity still. But I think increasingly as the show's staff has expanded, as the show's interests have expanded, we kind of see ourselves as like a journalistic storytelling enterprise, that we kind of take that lens to a lot of different things. And I think so often it's really just led by the curiosity of the staff. We have like 20 plus people on staff, and we'll have these pitch meetings where people come in with their ideas like written up, and we all, you know, come to the meeting having read people's ideas, and then it's really just a creative like brainstorming session where people say their thoughts or they ask questions, and they're like, oh, this made me think of this other person who studies this really interesting thing that's kind of tangential, you should talk to them. And yeah, so much of it comes out of that collective experience. Is also, I guess, going back to like creating alone versus being in a room together. Like so much of Radiolab, what you'll hear is like one or two people talking to each other, but it is so much a product of a group of people that come together and think on these things.
Yeah, I'm lucky enough to have a small team too, and so the pitch process is probably a little bit simpler than what Radiolab does, but it's still a collaborative process. And we have, you know, over the years, we've kind of developed what works in terms of practical engineering, and you know, some of it's about constraints, right? It's like we have this amount of time to come up with an idea, write it, shoot it, edit it, and so some of it is like pushing the ideas down, and some of it's like pushing the ideas up, like what if we did this, and a lot of my episodes we build something in the garage as a demonstration, and so that's a fun part of the process too. But we also have like these guiding principles, which is that the channel is centered around deciphering the constructed world, and so if it doesn't fit in that box, then it's a no-go right away. And then from there, it's driven by our curiosities. It's things where you were driving outside and you saw some weird thing, and wondered what the heck it was, or someone mentioned something, or you read something in the news, or we just constantly are trying to grab ideas and see if we can shape them into a video topic.
Do you ever just like trip and fall into a rabbit hole and get so excited that like the whole video schedule just, I got to do this right now?
I would say on our end, no. I am such an engineer at heart, and part of that is like this extreme devotion to the process. And so every step of the production process of our videos is like pretty regimented and finishes on a deadline, and so the next person can do their thing. And so, we definitely dive into rabbit holes, but I know when to pull back and say, we got to get this done.
That's awesome. I think Radiolab aspires to be like that, and then we kind of have a whole team of people that like get sucked into their rabbit holes, and then it's like, okay, what are we putting on the feed? Because this thing, needs more time, and it's gone off in a different direction. And I think part of that is intentional too, because some of what we're doing is trying to tell a story, but also thinking about, kind of related to what Joel was saying earlier about thinking about tropes and how do you subvert the common tropes when you're talking about a certain topic or telling a certain type of story. What we're trying to do is like, okay, how do you usually imagine this story would go? Let's try a different way of doing it, or let's take it 2 or 3 steps further than where you think the story would naturally end. And, sometimes that means like going down a completely different rabbit hole than where you started, and I think it makes the content better.
Even if it messes up your production schedule?
I personally think so. I think they're probably, our production manager would disagree with me. But yeah.
We also, if you guys want to wrap up at any point, just give me a little wave. Otherwise, I'll just keep going.
Love it, yeah.
Something that this is a change of topic, but something that I've noticed in a lot of conversations I've had this weekend, and also with creators in general, particularly in the last 6 months, is I think a lot of people are looking for like purpose. And in the backdrop of everything that's happening in the world, it's easy to look at what we're doing and say like, okay, we're telling really important stories. We know we're telling quality stories, but how is that translating to making the world better, potentially? And I'm wondering if you guys have grappled with that at all, particularly this year, and like, if so, did you come to any conclusions?
I grapple with that all the time. I'm a licensed professional civil engineer, and so I have to adhere to a code of ethics. And one of the tenets of that ethics code is that engineers endeavor to help the public understand what it is that we do. And I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for that, but especially for civil engineering and infrastructure, these are things that meet people's basic needs, like fresh water, fresh air, transportation, those kind of things. And so they're important, right? And for people to be able to, have opinions about these things, they need to know how they work and the major decisions that get wrestled with to make them into a reality. And so I just think that's really important to me, that to help people understand how these structures work, the decisions that go into them, and so that they can have informed opinions about, that affect how they vote or how they participate in public meetings or anything like that. So that's kind of my feeling about it, and that's why we tagline the channel as deciphering the constructed environment.
I actually didn't know that part of the PE code of ethics is teaching people how infrastructure works.
That's amazing.
It's incredible. It's so foresightful.
I think you're right. I think that like part of it is like what people do with what you've made once it's out in the world. I think, Radiolab is not gonna solve the world's problems. Like, we can talk about them. We can tell a compelling story about, some of the interesting problems that are out there. And I think every episode that we do has an afterlife. It's just as much about what we have said as much as it is about the thoughts that it sparks for whoever's listening to it. And you know, sometimes we'll get emails like, oh, I listened to a thing and it made me pick a different career path, or it made me, you know, bring this up with my students in class, or it made me have a conversation with a family member. And I feel like that is really that's really what we can do. I don't know that we should aspire to, like, or assume that we can do more than that.
And in that, like, I think you're both putting out a huge amount of emotional energy to make the world better. Do you feel like you are getting that back? Because as we're kind of posting things online into this, like, or on the radio in like this black box, or do you think that doing things in person, like the premiere we just had, is important for getting that kind of feedback for your own soul as a creator? I tried.
I don't know how to answer that. I mean, in a lot of ways, yes, I do feel like we get that back. Like, we get so much comments and feedback and all different kinds of ways to see how our work impacts the rest of the world. And like Sarah said, it's not, you know, we're not changing the world here, but it is nice to know that we're at least a part of the conversation. We're influencing how people think about the built world, and influencing people to make good decisions about what they do with their life and their education and stuff like that. But the local stuff is cool too. It's a fun experience, but it's, you know, it's hard to compete with the reach of the YouTube algorithm, I think.
Totally. I think part of it for me is just also remembering that even having a platform to begin with is such an insane privilege. Before I became a podcast producer and I was just a person who had, you know, my friends following me on social media, I used to write like really long Instagram captions. And like, we all do a version of this. Like, we all want our thoughts to be heard by people around us. And, you know, when you're in a position to have a lot of people listening to what you say, I kind of think that in and of itself is like this insane, like it's a rare and special thing. And I feel like that to me is a really rewarding experience. And when it resonates with people, I think that's like especially nice, but it's kind of like icing on the cake a little.
That was incredibly well put, and I think a really good way to end this panel. So thank you so much to Sarah and Grady.
Thanks, guys.